Hi. Who's this?
Sarah.
I would like to propose a toast. Zach. Happy birthday, old man.
Oh God, no, please. Please just put me down. Sarah's still up there. Ah!
The story follows a group of best friends, Amy, her boyfriend Dan, Zach, and Lauren. They travel together, have a lot of fun, and film their adventures on camera. Dan, who is clearly tipsy, picks up his camera and starts spinning around with it, which makes him lose his balance and fall off a cliff. He comes out with only minor bruises and returns to his terrified friends. 5 years later, Amy, her husband James, and their little daughter Sarah go to Mexico City to celebrate Zach's 30th birthday on Dan's new yacht. On the way, they are overtaken by Zach and Lauren on a motorcycle. The whole group arrives at a yacht club where the yacht is parked. Amy is the only one of her friends who wears a life jacket and takes her time getting close to the yacht. After her father drowned while sailing together, she developed a fear of water. With her husband's support, Amy overcomes her fear and climbs onto the deck. The friends look around the yacht and find Dan in the cabin with his new girlfriend, Michelle. The group hoists the sails and sets off. Zach and Lauren ask Dan how he could afford such a boat, but he just laughs and avoids answering. Amy and James put their daughter to bed and leave a walkie-talkie in her cabin to hear when she wakes up. The party is in full swing. Friends are drinking, dancing, and having a great time. Michelle offers the warm, sun-kissed group a swim. They happily accept and jump into the water. Amy stays on the boat with Dan and goes to the cabin to check on baby Sarah. Dan confesses to his ex-lover that he wants kids too and regrets being such a jerk in the past. Amy is happy with her husband, so she shortens the awkward conversation and suggests Dan return to the deck. Overboard, the friends are having fun. Zach finds a seashell at the bottom of the sea and gives it to Lauren. Michelle flirts with James. Amy walks the deck with Dan and confesses that she hates her phobia and is afraid it will be passed on to Sarah. In a moment of overconfidence, Dan lifts Amy into his arms and, ignoring her frantic protests, jumps into the water with her. She starts to panic, and memories of the day her father passed away flood back into her mind. The friends try to calm her down, but to her, their voices sound distant and unreal. Everyone suddenly realizes Dan didn't lower the ladder before jumping in. Only little Sarah is left on the boat, and around them stretches the vast, open sea. James hums a lullaby to comfort Amy. The others attempt to climb back onto the boat by kicking off the water, but they fail because the sides are too high. Michelle begins to panic. Tired and cold, she clings desperately to the inflatable dolphin. Dan asks her to give him the dolphin so he can use it to climb onto the boat, but the attempts fail, as the toy is too slippery and quickly deflates under his weight. The guys notice a flag waving from the back of the boat and Dan tries to grab it. He manages to hold on his third try, but the flag is unstable and can't support him. Amy regains some sense, and everyone takes a moment to think about their next move. Michelle goes into another fit of hysteria, convinced a shark is beneath them. Dan dives underwater but finds no one. Still, they know it won't be long before the predators arrive. Everyone turns on Dan, blaming him for what's happening. He knows he made a mistake but can't figure out how to fix it. Amy, tears streaming down her face, insists they need to find a way out because Sarah is alone upstairs. Michelle's mental state continues to worsen. Exhausted, she starts to drown and tries to take Amy's life jacket. They push her away from Amy, and she begins to have a breakdown. Lauren puts her on her back to calm her down and reads a prayer aloud. The group spends more time under the scorching sun. They run out of energy and are thirsty. Suddenly, somewhere near the boat, they hear a cell phone ringing. The sound comes from Zach's hanging jacket. Dan manages to toss the jacket aside, and Zach answers the call, but since the phone is completely wet, they don't have time to share anything. In a state of deep despair, Michelle takes the phone from Zach's hands, and it drops into the water, making it impossible for them to try to contact someone again. Dan comes up with a new plan. Take off all their clothes and tie a rope from them to throw onto the boat. At this point, the guys notice a boat passing by at high speed. The friends try hard to get the passengers' attention, but the people on the boat don't understand their situation and just wave their hands as they pass. They have to go back to Dan's original idea. Using the knife they found in Zach's jacket, they cut the clothes into pieces and made a rope from them. James asks Dan if it's possible to reach the boat from below, but Dan isn't sure, so he checks the boat himself and, taking the knife from his friends, dives dives under the water. Meanwhile, the group manages to throw the homemade rope onto the boat, and now Zach tries to use it to climb up. This attempt also fails, the rope breaks, and Zach falls back into the water. James is also frustrated by the failure. During another dive, he accidentally drops the knife. To save the sinking knife, he swims too deep and hits the bottom of the boat while coming up. James swims out, and Lauren checks him. Blood from his ear shows that he has suffered a head injury and needs to see a doctor right away. This becomes the final breaking point for Zach, and he decides to take more extreme steps. He takes a knife from James and starts breaking through the side of the boat to get upstairs. Dan runs to his friend in a panic and tries to stop him, because he doesn't want the boat to be damaged. During the struggle, Dan accidentally stabs Zach in the stomach. The situation gets completely out of control. From the radio, Sarah's frantic crying is heard, and she is already awake and doesn't see her parents nearby. Because of the severe injury and lack of medical help, Zach slowly and painfully dies. Michelle walks away from the group and, eventually, loses her strength because of tiredness and collapses. Dan tries to help her, but he realizes it's too late. Grunting and breathing heavily, Zach tries to make a joke. He thinks about their trip 5 years ago and wishes Dan had brought a camera this time. His last thought is of Lauren. He remembers how beautiful she was the last time they saw each other. After saying these words, Zach becomes quiet, and his body goes limp, falling into Lauren's arms. She starts to sob uncontrollably. This time, James is getting more anxious. He bursts out at Dan, accusing him of caring more about the boat than the lives of his friends. Amy tries to calm her husband down, but he gets even angrier because his wife is defending her ex-lover. James's sudden movements make him start to throw up. Dan tells his friends he lied to them about the yacht and his money situation. It turns out Dan had borrowed the yacht from his boss, whom he works for as an errand boy. He pretended to be the owner to attract beautiful girls like Michelle. He wanted to show off his luxurious life to his old friends so they wouldn't realize he had achieved nothing in years. That's why he didn't want any knife marks on the boat. Now, his best friend is dead. When he realizes what he did, Dan starts to cry. Lauren admits she was in love with Zach but never told him. Amy persuades her friend to let go of his dead body. Several more hours pass on the open sea. Tired, everyone keeps their balance on the water and remembers moments from their lives. James's condition gets worse, and he starts to shout. Lauren, unable to stand the stillness, says goodbye to her friends and swims away, hoping to reach shore and call for help. Little Sarah continues to cry. Amy tries to shout to her through the radio, but the baby doesn't stop crying. She remembers Zach's plan to get on board with a knife and is about to jump into the water to find it. Dan stops her and goes underwater himself, trying to make up for his comrades somehow. It's getting dark. Amy is left alone on the water with James. He keeps passing out and tells his beloved he's tired and has a headache. It starts to rain, and James dies quietly. Amy screams, devastated by the pain of losing her beloved. Dan hears her cries, but he keeps diving into the water to find the knife and save them. Night falls. Finally accepting her husband's death, Amy releases his body. As she says goodbye, she hums the lullaby they used to sing to her daughter before bedtime. Dan emerges from the water, screaming in pain. His arm is cramped, and Amy shares her vest with him to help him swim to the boat. Meanwhile, the storm gets worse, and the chances of survival in such conditions are very slim. Dan, feeling helpless, slams his goggles into the stern of the boat with all his strength. The goggles shatter, and all that's left is the glass, which hurts his hand. That's when he gets an idea of how to use the glass to save himself. Dan pushes the glass into the gap between the board and the folding gangway and holds onto it with his hand. He calls out to Amy, who, using Dan's hand as a stepping stone, tries to climb aboard the boat. She tries to grab hold of the board, but the heavy rain makes her hand slip, and she falls into the water. Dan tells her not to give up and try again. She gets on his shoulders and tries to climb up again. Dan struggles to hold on to the sharp shard of glass, screaming in pain every time Amy steps on his arm. Amy's hand slips again, and she falls. Gathering all her remaining strength, she makes another attempt and finally manages to cling to the side and climb to the deck. Overwhelmed with emotion, Dan laughs and shouts for joy. Amy lowers the gangway and immediately runs into the cabin to her sobbing daughter. Dan clings to the gangway but stops. He is faced with a choice: to follow his friend and save himself or accept punishment for what happened to his friends because of his mistake. Taking Sarah in her arms, Amy comforts the little girl and lies down beside her, relieved that the nightmare they went through is over. Moments later, she realizes Dan never came aboard. She walks out onto the deck and sees a life jacket floating alone on the water. In the distance, Amy spots Dan's still figure. She tries shouting and reaching for the life jacket, but fails. She realizes her guilt made Dan decide to drown himself. Amy remembers how her father drowned in front of her when she was a child. To stop another tragedy, Amy overcomes her fear and swims after Dan. He goes under, but Amy tries to pull him up. Scenes from what's happening now are mixed with memories from her past. Back then, little Amy was also trying to save her father. It is morning. A fishing boat approaches the yacht. The fisherman swims around the empty vessel and shouts at the passengers. When there's no answer, the fishing boat leaves. Sarah wakes up in the cabin and starts crying. At the end of the story, we see Amy standing on the deck, looking into the distance. Dan lies at her feet, unconscious, but she managed to save him. The fishing boat is no longer in sight. Only the sound of the engine can be heard in the distance. But she has survived and can now go home. Subscribe to watch more videos like this. Leave a comment about your favorite movie and we will make it next. Thanks for watching.